else.
He called me a social climber. He said I was replaceable. He walked me out of the building I gave 17 years of my life to, with a handshake and a beige envelope. And that Monday, the Monday I told him to worry about, $24 million.
Gone.
Before lunch, and I was sitting in my new office drinking coffee. I didn't do a single thing. I didn't have to. If you have ever been written off by someone who didn't bother to understand what you actually did, someone who looked right through you, called you replaceable, and smiled while doing it, this story is going to feel like oxygen. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment below telling me about a time someone underestimated you. Because Margaret Lane's story is about to remind every single one of us what quiet power actually looks like. Let's get into it. There was something cold about the way his shoes clicked across the polished tile. Like a metronome. Steady. Purposeful. Slightly too loud. He didn't speak to the receptionist. Didn't smile at the security guard. Didn't hold the elevator for the woman with a stack of folders who was clearly 2 steps behind him. He just walked in with his briefcase like he already owned the place. Technically, he did. Christopher Rains. New CEO. Somewhere in his early 30s. Young enough to still carry that dangerous gleam. The kind of gleam that says the world is yours to restructure. His appointment had come through one of those carefully worded memos. You know the kind. Full of phrases like exciting new chapter and bold leadership transition. Corporate poetry. The kind of language designed to make you feel good about something that should make you very, very nervous. Margaret Lane had seen enough of those memos in her 17 years at Ridgemont and Wallace to know exactly what they meant. Someone upstairs wants heads to roll.
And it won't be theirs.
She watched him from the glass wall of her small corner office. Not quite executive level, but far enough from the buzzing hive of interns and marketing assistants that she could think clearly. Could observe without being observed. Christopher didn't knock on doors. He opened them. Mid-meeting, mid-sentence, it didn't matter. He walked the floors with a tablet in hand, scribbling notes, firing off questions that didn't wait for answers. He had the energy of a man performing competence rather than practicing it. And when people stumbled over their words trying to explain their work to him, when they hesitated, flushed, scrambled for the right terminology, he smiled. Not cruelly. No, that would have been too honest. The way a man smiles when he's already decided something, and the conversation is just a formality. He didn't come to see Margaret that first day. She wasn't on his radar. That was fine. She preferred it that way. At lunch, a small cluster of the longer-serving employees gathered in the break room. Someone, Patricia from Contracts, who had been there almost as long as Margaret, said the new CEO reminded her of a substitute teacher who thought he could fix the whole school in a week. They all laughed quietly.
Carefully.
Margaret stirred her tea and kept her thoughts to herself. She had outlasted 3 CEOs. One left for health reasons. Another for legal ones. The third had tried to outsource more than he understood and discovered, too late, that some things couldn't be replaced by a cheaper version. It never mattered how sharp their suits were, how glossy their vision statements, how confident their stride down that polished corridor. They always made the same fundamental mistake. They assumed that experience came with the title. Not before it. When Margaret passed Christopher in the hallway later that afternoon, he glanced at her ID badge. Just for a moment. Just long enough to confirm she was someone who worked there. Then he looked straight through her. Didn't recognize the name. Didn't stop to ask what she did. Didn't register that the quarterly performance briefs tucked under her arm, the ones he would almost certainly quote from in his Friday presentation, had been compiled largely because of her work. To him, she was just another face in the system. Part of the machinery. Not worth inspecting. Margaret returned to her office and closed the door behind her. And she sat with a feeling she knew well. Not fear. Not quite. Something more like standing at a window watching storm clouds gather on the horizon. Nothing had happened yet. Not really. But you could feel it coming. The way people stopped chatting at their desks. The way certain managers now avoided eye contact in the hallway. The way Linda from HR, a woman who had been with the company almost as long as Margaret, a woman who had seen everything, looked unusually pale that week. Margaret opened her laptop and began composing a routine email to Mr. Ling at Gold Peak Tech in Shenzhen. She typed slowly, deliberately, in Mandarin as always, and she wondered, quietly, how much longer she would be allowed to do even that. The next week moved like water seeping under a closed door.
Slow. Steady.
Inevitable. No dramatic announcements. No official memos. Just a series of closed-door restructuring meetings and corridor conversations that went silent the moment anyone in a good suit walked by. The building was changing its posture. Bracing. Margaret kept her head down. She completed her reports. Coordinated the upcoming video call with Shenzhen. Wrote careful, culturally attuned emails in Mandarin to smooth over a minor accounting delay with Gold Peak, the kind of delay that, in the wrong hands, with the wrong tone, could corrode months of goodwill in a single exchange. She handled it in 45 minutes. She didn't mention it to anyone. Christopher, meanwhile, was moving through departments like a cold front. Wherever he went, nervous laughter followed him in like a draft under a door. And then the fire started. Not literal fires, but close. Mid-level managers, people who had been with Ridgemont and Wallace for a decade, sometimes two, began disappearing. They were called into short meetings. They didn't come back. No farewell emails. No handshakes. No little collection for a going-away card. Just an empty desk, a hasty box, and a name removed from the internal directory. Their replacements arrived quickly.
Christopher's people.
Every single one. Shiny resumes. Impressive LinkedIn profiles. Carefully cultivated personal brands built on buzzwords like agile and disruptive and future-forward. In meetings, they asked questions that anyone with 6 months of context could have answered themselves. They needed things explained twice, sometimes 3 times. And rather than feel embarrassed about it, they laughed.
Called the old processes outdated.
Said things like, "Why are we still doing it this way?" with the tone of someone who had just discovered a dusty attic, as though the reason everything was still working was somehow despite the experience in the room, not because of it. They called it modernization. Margaret called it a disaster in slow motion. She sat quietly through meeting after meeting, watching, listening. She had learned long ago that silence under men like Christopher wasn't agreement. It was survival instinct. And then came the Thursday morning that changed everything. Christopher stood at the front of the conference room like a general reviewing troops he had already written off. He clicked through slides faster than anyone could read them. Efficiency.
Cost centers. Agility.
Lean operations. Every department will be evaluated, he said, flashing that practiced grin. He didn't look at Margaret when he said it. He didn't need to. When the meeting ended, she gathered her papers slowly. Never the first to leave, never the last. But as she rose from her chair, she felt him beside her. Margaret, right? Like he was trying to place a face from a dream. Yes, she said. He smiled. That same thin, rehearsed smile he had given everyone. What exactly do you handle again?
She paused.
She could have listed her title, could have recited the job description word for word. But she knew, with complete certainty, that none of it would mean anything to him. I manage our communications with Gold Peak Tech and our other strategic partners in China, she said carefully. Business relationship management, cultural protocol, negotiations. His brow furrowed slightly, the look of a man encountering something inconvenient. We have someone doing translations, don't we? I don't just translate, Margaret said.
Her voice was calm, even.
Almost gentle. I manage the relationship. Business etiquette, cultural expectations, trust. It's a bit more involved. He nodded, already half-turned toward the door. Well, good. We'll be streamlining a lot of processes soon. Appreciate the work. And he was gone. Margaret stood for a moment beneath the fluorescent lights, their quiet buzz the only sound in the emptied conference room. She felt it then, not anger, not indignation. Something colder, heavier. He didn't understand. Worse than that, he didn't want to. She passed Linda's desk on the way back to her office. Linda looked up. Their eyes met briefly. And Linda gave her that small, sad smile. The one that carried more information than any memo ever had. Be careful. Friday arrived heavy. The kind of heavy that has nothing to do with weather. The office was quieter than it should have been. Conversations were murmured. Eyes kept flicking toward closed doors. At 10:15 in the morning, Margaret's email pinged. Meeting request. Christopher Rains. 10:30 a.m. Conference Room B. No agenda. No explanation. Just like all the others who had disappeared this month. Margaret sat very still for a moment, hands folded neatly in her lap. Then she stood up, adjusted her jacket, and walked to the conference room with the measured, unhurried steps of someone who had already made peace with what was coming. Christopher was already seated when she arrived, a folder in front of him. Linda from HR, 2 chairs to his left, face carefully and professionally neutral, the practiced expression of someone required to witness something difficult and forbidden from reacting to it. She didn't meet Margaret's eyes. "Margaret, good to see you," Christopher said briskly, the tone of a man working through a to-do list. "Please sit down." She sat, hands folded calmly on the table. He opened the folder, barely glanced at it. He had rehearsed this. "We've been reviewing our internal structure," he began, voice smooth and practiced. "After careful consideration, we've decided to consolidate certain functions. Your role, while valuable in the past, is no longer aligned with the direction we're moving in." He kept going. Something about an external firm, language services, rotating account managers, streamlined processes. Margaret listened without expression. She was well past shock, well past bargaining. She was watching a man read a script he didn't understand, about a role he didn't understand, for a company he was quietly dismantling from the inside out. "Of course, we appreciate your years of service," Christopher added, softening his voice slightly. "HR has prepared a severance package. 2 months' pay plus accrued vacation. It's very fair." Linda slid a beige envelope across the table. Silence. Christopher shifted slightly, misreading her quiet as hesitation. "I know this may be difficult, but change is necessary for growth." And that was when Margaret allowed herself a small smile. Not bitter, not angry, just sad for him, really. "You're certain you can manage without me?" she asked quietly. He gave a short laugh, almost condescending. "We'll be just fine. We need to be more dynamic. It's nothing personal." Margaret stood. She left the beige envelope exactly where it was. She looked at Christopher Rains, really looked at him, and saw not a leader, not a visionary, not even a competent manager. Just a boy, playing dress-up, with grown-up toys he couldn't possibly understand. "I wish you good luck on Monday," she said simply. He blinked. A flicker of confusion, the strange specificity of the words, the strange absence of emotion in her voice. Then the smile returned, shallow and certain. "Thank you, Margaret. Best of luck to you as well." She walked out, past Linda's careful, pitying gaze, past the curious eyes of colleagues frozen at their desks, down the long hallway that had once felt like home and now felt like the corridor of a place that no longer knew what it had. The clouds outside had thickened, low and gray, pressing down on the city skyline. The first drops of rain tapped against the lobby windows as she passed through. She didn't stop, didn't cry, didn't let her hands shake, not even once. By the time she reached her car, the rain was coming in earnest. The world through the windshield dissolved into smeared watercolor, soft and shapeless.
She sat there,
gripping the steering wheel, feeling something complicated move through her, grief for the years, yes. But beneath it, cold and certain as a compass needle finding north, something else entirely. They thought they could replace her. They thought a contract with a faceless firm could substitute for 17 years of understanding, of nuance, of trust. They thought they were prepared. She exhaled slowly. They weren't, and Monday would prove it. The weekend after her dismissal was strangely peaceful. Margaret cleaned her home office, responded to a handful of careful, sympathetic texts from the colleagues brave enough to reach out. Others stayed silent, she understood. Under men like Christopher, association with the dismissed could put a target on your own back. She didn't blame them. Sunday night, she updated her resume. Not out of desperation, not out of panic, out of precision, because she knew something Christopher did not. Something no job title on an org chart could capture or delete. Relationships, reputation,
Trust.
those things didn't vanish because a man signed a piece of paper. Monday morning, while the city woke under gray skies, Margaret put on a crisp navy blouse, tucked a slim portfolio under her arm, and walked into an interview at Lawson and Reed Global Consultants. A former colleague, someone she had met years ago at an industry conference in Singapore, had reached out the day after hearing whispers about what had happened at Ridgemont. They needed someone who could navigate East Asian business relations, not just linguistically.
Culturally.
Someone who understood the unwritten rules, the layers of meaning beneath a polite pause, the difference between what a client said and what they actually meant. The meeting was formal but warm. Mr. Reed himself led it. He asked pointed, intelligent questions, and here was the part that moved her more than she expected. He listened when she answered. Not performed listening. Not the kind where a man's eyes are already moving to his phone. Actual listening. By the time she walked back into the afternoon light, she had an offer in her inbox. Better salary. More autonomy. A role that asked her to build something, rather than quietly preserve something someone else kept trying to tear apart. She accepted without hesitation. Meanwhile, Ridgemont and Wallace was humming with exactly the kind of nervous energy a company produces when it knows, on some cellular level, that something has gone wrong but hasn't quite figured out what yet. Messages filtered through to Margaret from the few friends still willing to be seen talking to her. He's calling you a social climber. Says you were holding on to relevance. Says the company's better off without old gatekeepers. They replaced you with an agency out of Singapore. Rotating account managers. He says it's more efficient. She read them without expression. Social climber. She almost laughed aloud. If Christopher had spent even 10 minutes trying to understand what she actually did, rather than what her job title implied, he might have grasped why that description was so spectacularly, almost poetically wrong. She had never wanted the title. Had never lobbied for a corner office or a seat at the executive table. She had wanted something far simpler and, apparently, far rarer. Competence recognized. Work respected. Partners treated with dignity. Christopher didn't speak that language. Not yet. Monday evening, Margaret sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and her laptop. She checked the time difference between New York and Shenzhen. Reviewed a few articles about current shifts in Chinese corporate culture. Small details. The kind of thing Christopher's bright, ambitious, inexperienced hires would have scrolled past without a second glance. She closed the laptop and waited, because storms don't announce themselves with fanfare. They build slowly,
Steadily.
until the ground is saturated and the rivers have no choice but to overflow. Tomorrow, the real consequences would begin, and she wouldn't have to lift a single finger to make them happen. Monday morning at Ridgemont and Wallace began the way all important mornings at corporate offices begin, with performance. Good coffee in paper cups. Pressed suits. The manufactured hum of artificial enthusiasm. On the 15th floor, a small group of executives gathered in the glass-walled conference room. The Gold Peak Tech delegation from Shenzhen was due in under an hour. This was not a routine meeting. The deal on the table was a 3-year partnership renewal. Cornerstone territory. The kind of contract that didn't just prop up quarterly targets, it anchored the company's entire reputation in international markets. Millions of dollars. Years of relationship building. The kind of agreement that, once gone, didn't come back. Christopher sat at the head of the gleaming conference table, tapping his pen against his leather notebook in that way he had. Impatient, restless, already bored with the waiting. To his left sat Martin and Carla, his hand-picked hires.
Bright.
Ambitious. Completely, dangerously inexperienced in the particular art of international diplomacy. Across the city, in a spacious, sun-filled office, Margaret Lane quietly sipped her coffee. She didn't check the time.
She didn't need to.
At precisely 10 a.m., the Gold Peak delegation arrived. Mr. Ling, Vice President of International Affairs, accompanied by 2 senior advisors. They entered the conference room with the quiet grace of people who had spent decades learning that the loudest person in a room is rarely the most powerful. Christopher stood immediately, hand extended, the salesman's grin at full wattage. "Welcome, welcome. So glad you could make it." The delegation shook hands.
Stiff.
Formal. No bows, no small talk, no reciprocal warmth. The kind of deliberate formality that carried a message if you knew how to read it. Christopher did not. He launched directly into his presentation. Buzzwords, efficiency metrics, cost optimization, slides clicking past before anyone could absorb them. He spoke with the rapid-fire confidence of a man who had rehearsed the delivery of the presentation without once thinking about the audience receiving it. Mr. Ling listened, his expression unreadable.
Still.
Patient in the specific way of a man deciding how long to allow something to continue. Then he raised one hand, gently,
Barely.
and Christopher stopped mid-sentence. The silence that followed was total. "We would like to speak with Mississippi Margaret Lane," Mr. Ling said.
Politely.
Firmly. The temperature in the room dropped 3 degrees. Christopher's smile faltered for the first time. A shadow moved across his features, there and gone, like something he didn't want anyone to see. Margaret is no longer with the company," he said, recovering quickly. "We've streamlined our communications team. The new structure is actually more efficient, better equipped too." Mr. Ling glanced at one of his advisors. A single, silent exchange, brief as a heartbeat. Then, in the measured, unhurried voice of a man who has thought carefully about every word he is about to say, Mississippi Lane was not simply a translator.
Pause.
She was our strategic partner. She understood our needs, our culture, our expectations. She understood what we did not always say out loud. Another pause. "Without her, I am afraid we must reconsider the future of our cooperation." Christopher chuckled, a strange, almost reflexive sound. The laugh of a man who hasn't yet realized the floor has disappeared beneath him. "I assure you, sir, our new processes are even better positioned to." Mr. Ling raised his hand again. Barely a movement, but it silenced the room as completely as a door slamming shut. "You have made a grave mistake," he said. Not loudly, not with anger, with the quiet finality of a verdict. "Firing Mississippi Lane demonstrates a profound disrespect toward her and toward our relationship. These are not things we take lightly." Christopher's face had gone red, then pale. The expensive confidence he had carried in like a second briefcase was disintegrating in real time. I understand your concerns, but I genuinely believe in the direction we're." Mr. Ling rose from his chair. Both advisors rose with him, in perfect unison. "There will be no renewal of our agreement at this time," he said simply. "We value respect above all else. You have shown us none." And without another word, without a backward glance, the Gold Peak delegation walked out of the conference room. Their footsteps clicked sharp and final against the marble floor. Then silence. Christopher sat at the head of his conference table and stared at the closed door like a man waiting for it to reopen. Like if he stared long enough, the last 5 minutes would reverse themselves. Martin fumbled with the laptop. Carla murmured something about following up later. Everyone in that room, including Christopher, knew there would be no following up. Within an hour, the news had moved through the building like fire through dry paper. $24 million.
Gone.
By lunch, the CFO had called an emergency board meeting. Investors were circling. Department heads scrambled to contain damage they didn't fully understand yet. Christopher attempted the spin, cultural complications, rigid traditionalism, a miscommunication by the Singapore agency. But the whispers were faster than the spin. He called Margaret incompetent. He thought a contractor could replace a relationship 17 years in the making. He's finished. Across the city, Margaret closed her laptop after a client call, stretched her arms above her head, and smiled. She hadn't lifted a single finger. They had done it entirely themselves, and the storm had only just begun. The days that followed were a slow-motion collapse. The canceled Gold Peak contract sent tremors through every corner of Ridgemont and Wallace's portfolio. One by one, international partners began making calls, expressing concerns, postponing meetings. A European client, hearing the word instability and needing no further information, froze all pending contracts. Christopher's hand-picked team floundered. They didn't have relationships to fall back on. They had processes, templates, efficient systems built for a world where relationships were transactional and trust was assumed, not earned. Inside the building, the atmosphere had curdled from tense into something closer to panicked. People walked faster, spoke less. Middle management whispered about budget meetings behind closed doors. Layoffs returned, real ones this time, without the polite fiction of restructuring. Severance packages shrank. Resignation letters multiplied. And still Christopher stood at whiteboards giving speeches about resilience and adaptation and the lessons every great company learns in difficult seasons. He blamed the market, the economy, cultural rigidity in international partnerships. Never himself. Never once himself. On Thursday morning, 4 days after the Gold Peak meeting, Margaret's phone rang. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. 30 minutes later, the same number called again. This time, she recognized the extension. She answered. Margaret, Christopher here. The voice was bright, artificially so, like a light switched on in a room that had been dark too long. Hope you're doing well. Very well.
Thank you, she said.
Listen, I was hoping we could talk.
Clear the air.
Maybe explore some opportunities to collaborate. I think your expertise could be valuable right now, possibly on a consulting basis. Nothing too formal. Nothing too formal. In other words, he wanted the benefit of her work without the cost of admitting he had been wrong. He wanted a patch for the wound he had torn open. Not acknowledgement. Not accountability. Just Margaret, quietly in the background, fixing what he had broken. She let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Of course, I'd compensate your time, he added quickly, mistaking her quiet for hesitation. She considered for a long moment. She could have said no. Could have left him to drown in the mess he had made.
Part of her wanted to.
But something colder and more precise had surfaced beneath the instinct for refusal. An opportunity. Let's meet, she said finally. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., my office. She heard the relief in his voice before he could hide it.
Great.
Fantastic. See you then. She ended the call without another word. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table in the blue hour between daylight and dark and thought carefully about her next move. Not with bitterness. Not with rage. With the clean, deliberate focus of someone who knows exactly what they are doing and precisely why. Christopher wanted salvation, without confession. He would regret asking. The next morning, simple navy dress, minimal jewelry, no visible emotion. Christopher arrived 10 minutes late, the oldest power play in the book, still pretending he held cards in a hand he had already lost. He wore the same expensive watch, but the confidence was different now.
Cracked. Brittle.
Like fine china after a hairline fracture, still holding its shape, but tap it in the wrong place and it shatters. Margaret, good to see you again. He pitched it as mutual opportunity, temporary misunderstandings, transitional challenges. He never used the word failure. His pride had apparently made a contractual agreement with his tongue. He spread his hands at the end. We just need someone familiar with these clients to step in and smooth things over. No titles, no structures, just practical support. Margaret let the silence sit. Then, you're offering me a consulting role. No authority. No public acknowledgement. No correction of the narrative you spread after I left. He flushed. It's not personal, Margaret. It's business. She smiled. Thin as a blade. So is my answer. His eyes narrowed. Which is? I'll consider it, she said smoothly. On my terms. What terms? You'll see, she said and rose to end the meeting. Because now she had everything she needed. She wasn't going back to save him. She was going back to make absolutely certain he watched, with full clarity in high definition, exactly who had dismantled his empire. And this time, everyone would know whose hands had held the blade. The first rule of real revenge, not the hot, messy, reactive kind, but the kind that lasts, is patience. Not rage, not noise. Patience. Margaret spent the weekend planning with the kind of precision she had applied to every important negotiation of her career. She wasn't going to storm back into Ridgemont and Wallace demanding anything. That would have made her small, reactive. Exactly the caricature Christopher had already painted her as.
No.
Her method would be slower,
Sharper.
surgical. On Monday, under the terms of a short-term consulting contract Christopher had signed in such haste he hadn't properly read the access clauses, she re-entered the building. No title, no announcement, just a quiet agreement, a temporary workspace, a sterile glass box between two departments, clearly an afterthought, and access to internal systems. He thought he was using her. He thought wrong. By noon, she had access to the client database. By mid-afternoon, she made a call. Not through company emails. Not on any line that touched Ridgemont's systems. She dialed a private number, one Mr. Ling had given her years ago, in the early days of their partnership, back when trust between them had been something sacred and carefully built. He answered on the second ring. Mississippi Lane. Warmth in his voice. And beneath it, curious. To what do I owe this honor? She spoke in Mandarin. Slow, respectful, precise. I owe you an apology, she said, for my sudden departure and the confusion that followed. A pause. I understand, he said finally. Circumstances are sometimes beyond our control. Sometimes, she agreed. And sometimes they are the result of poor judgment. Another pause, longer this time. The kind of silence that in certain cultures carries more weight than words. Are you contacting me on behalf of Ridgemont and Wallace? No, she said carefully. I'm contacting you personally, because I believe you deserve to know the truth. She told him, without embellishment, without bitterness, just the facts, laid out with the same precision she brought to every negotiation. How she had been dismissed, how her warnings had been ignored, how the new leadership had looked at their partnership, at a relationship built on 17 years of mutual respect, and seen nothing but a cost center to trim. Mr. Ling listened without a single interruption. When she finished, he asked one question. Where are you now? Lawson and Reed Global Consultants, she said. We specialize in international partnerships, built on respect,
Continuity. Trust.
a long pause, then a low, knowing chuckle. I see, he said. Perhaps it is time we consider new partners. I leave that decision entirely to your wisdom, Margaret said. But I would be deeply honored to work with you again. They ended the call with the careful formality the relationship had always deserved. And just like that, quietly, without drama, without a single raised voice, the first stone had been removed from beneath Christopher's foundation. By the end of the week, Margaret had arranged a formal introduction between Mr. Ling and the executive team at Lawson and Reed. No fanfare, no press release, just a quiet meeting in a quiet room, the way real partnerships are actually built. Christopher, meanwhile, continued to stumble through damage control, unaware that the future he was fighting to salvage was slipping, inch by inch, into the hands of the woman he had shown the door. She reached out to 2 other former partners after that. Not directly. Through the gentle gravity of reputation and suggestion, the way trust travels in the world of international business, person to person, whisper to whisper. She simply made it known. At Lawson and Reed, we understand the value of respect. They didn't need much more than that. By the second Friday, 2 more major accounts had quietly transferred out of Ridgemont's portfolio. Christopher's assistants, the ones who had once dismissed Margaret's work as outdated formality, were now sending panicked messages asking her for advice on how to rebuild partner confidence. The irony was almost too much to bear. Then came an email from the CFO's office. Ridgemont and Wallace was initiating a temporary suspension of all new business initiatives. Translation: they were hemorrhaging cash and they couldn't stop it. Margaret closed her laptop. She took a slow, deliberate breath. It was time to end this properly. She asked Christopher for a meeting. He agreed instantly. The eagerness of a drowning man grabbing at anything that resembles a rope. They met in the same sterile conference room, the glass-walled box where he had first dangled his consulting offer. He was already there when she arrived, and he looked terrible. The expensive watch was still on his wrist, but the face beneath it had gone gray. Eyes ringed with exhaustion. The jaw set too tight. The grin performed rather than felt. "Margaret," he said, pushing the smile to its limit. "I'm so glad you wanted to meet. I think we're at a real turning point here. If we work together, we can still—" She raised her hand.
He stopped.
She shook his hand coolly and gestured to the chair. "I'm not here to advise you," she said. He blinked,
confused.
The sentence didn't compute. "I'm here to tell you that this is the end." The confusion on his face shifted. A flicker, anger, fear, something raw and unguarded he hadn't meant to show. He opened his mouth. She didn't give him the opening. "You fired me without understanding what I did. You replaced me with a contractor you didn't vet. You called me a social climber. You told everyone in that building that you didn't need me." She leaned forward slightly, voice still low, still controlled, like a scalpel, precise, cold, and absolutely certain of where it was going. "You are wrong." He shifted in his chair. "Margaret, look. I'm the reason Gold Peak Tech pulled out," she said flatly. His mouth opened.
Closed.
Opened again. "I'm the reason Lawson and Reed is currently signing the clients you're losing. One by one. Week by week." The color drained from his face so completely, so quickly, that it was almost remarkable to watch. "You did this," he breathed. "I didn't sabotage anything," she said, her voice like the surface of still water, smooth, cold, and very deep. "I simply reminded our former partners what respect looks like. They made their own choices." She gathered her folder, stood. "I came back," she said, and her voice dropped to something quiet and absolute. "Not to save you. I came back to make sure you saw, clearly with your own eyes, who dismantled your little empire." He rose shakily to his feet. His hands were trembling slightly. "You'll regret this," he said. His voice cracked on the last word. She smiled. A real smile this time. Not the careful, measured, professional smile she had deployed for 17 years. A genuine one, touched with satisfaction, with something that had waited a very long time to be felt. "No," she said simply. "You will."
She walked out.
She didn't look back at Christopher, still standing behind her, the ruins of his confidence scattered across the conference room floor like broken glass. She didn't look back at the office, at the hallways, at the building that had housed 17 years of her life and then discarded her like a redundant process. She walked through the lobby, through the glass doors, and out into the open air of the city. Some endings don't need grand finales. Sometimes it is simply enough to walk away while the fire you never started burns everything they thought they owned down to ash. Here's what Margaret Lane understood that Christopher Rains never did. Experience isn't decoration. It isn't a legacy mode. It isn't something you streamline away in the name of agility. Experience is the invisible architecture of everything that works. The relationships, the instincts, the thousand small moments of trust deposited over years that determine whether a phone call gets returned, whether a deal gets signed, whether a partnership survives the inevitable friction of doing business across cultures, languages, and time zones. You cannot replicate that with a rotating agency. You cannot rebuild it with a LinkedIn profile and a fresh buzzword. And you cannot insult someone who built it for 17 years, call them irrelevant, walk them out of the building, and then expect the thing they built to keep standing. Patience is not weakness. Silence is not agreement. And the most dangerous person in any room is the one that nobody thought to look at twice. If this story gave you that deep, clean rush of yes, that's exactly what should have happened. Smash that like button right now. Subscribe for more stories of people who were written off, overlooked, and underestimated, and then proved every single doubter catastrophically wrong. Drop your story in the comments. Have you ever watched karma work in real time? Have you ever been the Margaret in the room? I want to hear it. And if you're still hungry, the next video is right there. Another story, another reckoning, another reminder that the people who really run things rarely make the most noise.
See you in the next one.